Okay, so just to start off with, be good to understand in terms of the IT industry, if it's something that's always been on the horizon and you've ended up where you wanted to, or if it's something you came to coincidentally, accidentally, whatever, just how you ended up in the IT industry.
No, actually, this has been somewhat planned. IT industry, not so much. Engineering, absolutely planned. And this has been a goal growing up. I can share a little bit more background. I grew up in India in pretty humble middle-class upbringing. And the best way to get ahead in life was to get a good education and a well-paying career. And engineering and medicine were two great options at the time, some 30, 40 some years ago, 30 some years ago. I'm not that old. Anyways, so growing up, I was doing decent in school, and my dad was an engineer. And I have several people who've gone into engineering careers in my family, and that was something that inspired me. And that's how I got into engineering as a degree, and then at work. Over the past 20 years or so, I've worked in multiple domains. About half of it has been related to data warehousing, business intelligence, big data processing, and so on. And the other half in building large-scale distributed systems and security. About 2013, I started working for a storage array operating system. And I was responsible, amongst other things, for securing the storage array, and built on things like encryption of data, RBAC, authorization, authentication, really the basic building blocks of security. And the curiosity and the excitement around security that started in 2013 has just grown over time. And that's how I've ended up where I am today. And I'm very excited to be doing what I'm doing. So yeah, that's a brief evolution of how I got to where I am.
No, that's great. And then in terms of where you are today, can you just tell us a bit about, the role you've got at Sysdig and how long you've been there and how your career is developed there?
Yeah, Sysdig is about 6 months. So I've been here about 6 months. I am the VP of engineering for all of Runtime security, and there are various acronyms in cloud security, CNAP, CWPP, what have you. But to put it simply, it's for our customers that are operating on the cloud. My team is responsible for building products that understand what is happening at runtime and identify security threats that our customers need to be aware of and do something and act on. So this is the division of runtime security, all the way from building agents that give us visibility into the customer's infrastructure, understanding what are the threats that are relevant to the customer's ecosystem, be it Kubernetes, containers, or host, and detect security threats as they are happening, and identify what is the impact of that, provide visualization to our customers so that they can then go take action. And we also help them with remediation, whether it is policy-based or machine learning-based detections. We give customers visibility into runtime security threats that might be happening. If this was a whole lot of jargon, I can take another half an hour and explain what that means.
No, that's fine. So, with my limited knowledge, is that what I would call DevSecOps? Is that the space you're in, or is it something a little bit adjacent to that? What exactly?
Yes. So all of our offerings at Sysdig are catered to DevOps and SecOps audience. So the people that are running the infrastructure and making decisions on what should and should not run on the customer's infrastructure are our primary audience. So yes, DevSecOps is the group of people that we cater to, all the way from monitoring to runtime security to cloud security and posture management solutions. We have an array of products that help our customers run their infrastructure with confidence.
Okay, and I mean, we're supposed to be talking about your career and women IT.
Yeah.
If you forgive me, I just want to follow up one more.
Yeah.
In terms of DevSecOps, because I know DevOps is very well understood, but DevSecOps is perhaps not the poor relation, but it's maybe not as well understood by everyone. How important it is in that DevOps cycle and who's quite responsible. So I'm just intrigued in your thoughts as to sort of where it's at and where it needs to be.
So traditionally, and this is perhaps a tangent, and you can tell me if I'm going too far into the weeds. Traditionally, if you look back 20 years or so, people built products that are entirely monolithic. So software was, we run everything on a particular machine. And then you can think of it as little windows that we opened up in the perimeter defense that we had, saying, okay, for an email server, we are going to open up a few ports because we know there is activity that's coming in and emails are going out. For a DNS server, we know there's going to be activity. For source code systems, perforce in the traditional sense or whatever, we don't need external connectivity, and we're going to build everything internally and so on and so forth. Perimeter defense was the big security problem that IT folks were focused on. But if you fast forward 15, 20 years now, everything is built on the cloud. Customers and our developers are building solutions and deploying it very rapidly, right? And we all use third-party solutions that we are incorporating into our tech stacks, microservices, and logging solutions, monitoring solutions that are built by somebody else. So for somebody to say, I'm going to control everything and open up little ports for connectivity is just impossible. So a lot of it is inherently open. We use a lot of open source solutions also, and developers are rapidly making changes to code and deploying it. So the pace at which security threats can come into play and someone can exploit it, given this open connectivity and cloud computing universe that we live in, is extremely rapid. So DevOps and SecOps are not two different things. They are almost intertwined. And as developers incorporate some, let's say, open source solution, build a solution on top of the, build a microservice on top of that and deploy it into production, this can happen in sometime in hours or days, and doesn't give DevOps and SecOps time to catch up with each other and come up with solutions. Everything we do needs to be integrated into the developer's workflow. So we start by looking at, okay, I have an EC2 instance. How is this configured? And if there is a misconfiguration, what are the security threats? And on that EC2 instance, I'm running a container. And within that container, I'm running 5 different solutions, softwares. And some of them might have vulnerabilities. We need to be scanning those and understanding what is happening there. If a developer introduces a new software, we need to catch that immediately and say, okay, this one is vulnerable. Are you sure you want to do this? And all of these things, the cloud entities we talked about, whether it's an IAM policy or an EC2 instance, we are doing that through code. Nobody is going and clicking buttons. So infrastructure as code is very critical for us to keep track of. And that's also part of what our teams do here. And then we go into the programs that are running actively. You may be running a database server with some vulnerabilities as a client. And running in the client mode, it may not be vulnerable at all, but the same software running in server mode might be highly vulnerable. So at runtime, we are looking at what are the network connections that are happening to this vulnerable source component, identify what is the criticality of the risk, and then present it to our customers. So going back to your original question, DevSecOps is so tightly integrated today, and the pace at which developers are making decisions and running things in production gives no time to treat them as 2 separate entities. And it needs to be integrated into one simple workflow that catches things as quickly as possible. You hear a lot about shift left, and this is really what that means. So going more and more closer to where the developers are making decisions and catching security threats as they may be happening, maybe not even are. I don't know if that was too much into the weeds, but
no, that's brilliant. I appreciate that. Thank you for that. I mean, in terms of how you've progressed in your career, I'm just interested in terms of that, we're talking obviously about Women IT, the series. So have you found that your gender has been because basically women, I can't remember if it's up to about 30% in the IT industry now, from a much lower starting. Have you found yourself sort of to be in the minority, and has that been an issue, or have you been respected because of your knowledge and skills? You've been treated as an equal. Just thoughts as to your career and what may or may not have happened.
Am I in the minority? Absolutely, yes. There aren't too many women, especially as you advance in your career. There aren't a lot of women that you get to collaborate with and work with, right? So that's reality. when I was early in my career, there were more women that were my peers. But one of the challenges has been that a lot of my peers that I started my career with have dropped off due to various reasons. And when I look back at my own career, I don't think I was necessarily disadvantaged or treated differently because I was a woman. If I knew what I was doing, meritocracy does thrive in this industry. I was respected for what I was doing. And if I was doing something wrong, people gave me that feedback. Where I felt a lot challenged is not having that support system to get me through phases of my life that are inherently difficult. I'm a mom of two. One of them is in college, one is in high school. When my children were younger, it was extremely difficult for me to continue operating at a pace that the industry moves in without proper support systems, right? Especially coming into a different country as an immigrant where I don't have the familial support that I would have otherwise relied on has been challenging. So the biggest challenge for me hasn't been people treating me differently because I was a woman. The lack of support system where I could rely on somebody to take care of my kids when they were sick or take time off because I wasn't feeling great was a big challenge. And no matter how much equality plays in, inherently, I was taking on more of the child rearing responsibilities and holding it as a higher priority. I have one of the most supportive husbands that I could ask for. But still, it was one of those things that I have always asked myself, do I really want to do this? Continue my career if that means I have to be away from my kids when they're sick, and so on and so forth. But I think we've come a long way in that regard, because when I had my kids, the first one especially, he's now 19, I went back at 6 weeks after giving birth. And that was expected, that was the norm. Right now, I think most Silicon Valley companies offer 4 to 6 months of maternity, paternity leave so that parents can take the time to bond with their children. And this is somewhat embarrassing. We have so many facilities for new moms and new parents coming back to work. But back in the day, I'm aging myself now, there were no rooms that were meant for moms to go pump breast milk. And this is an embarrassing story to share, but I have used a supply closet, which multiple people had keys to. And I had to sit against the door so that no one would barge in when I was going through this. So things have been difficult, but when I look at today, 20 years into the industry, when I look back, things have changed so much. Companies are more understanding, supportive. Our maternity leave policies, having facilities for women that have just come back from, having a child, whether it was a natural born child, adopted child, whatever that might be. All of that has improved, especially after COVID. Remote work has become the norm. And nobody frowns upon somebody that has to get up at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the evening to go pick up their children or anything of that sort. The flexibility is definitely better than it was a long time ago. So yeah, it has been challenging. I'm glad I stuck it out because the tech industry is one of the best places for women to be in. Despite the minority situation that we have going on, we don't have too many women. But think about it this way, well-paying jobs and mentally stimulating, challenging work that we can contribute and make an impact on. And it's not, physical labor. So why not? And it gives us an ability to influence how society is changing. Because if you think about 20 years ago, cell phones were new, everything was new. The tech industry has created what life is today. And I get to be part of that. So I would encourage every young woman out there to give it a shot.
Just quickly on your sort of, winding
Yep.
the clock back. Did you feel under any pressure from various employers, to get, rushed back to work, or, because you might miss out on a promotion or whatever? Or do you think you largely put yourself under the pressure because you were just aware? And also, did you get much? It sounds like, obviously there wasn't, shall we say, the infrastructure in place, but were you lucky? Did you find one or two people that were sort of
Absolutely.
empathetic and therefore did sort of look out for you?
Absolutely. And interesting you say that. I was due for a promotion when I had just found out I was pregnant. For about 4 or 5 months, I did not share with anybody that I was pregnant, and I wore loose clothes because I was worried that I would not get the promotion if somebody found out I was pregnant and going away for a while. Perhaps that was completely in my head. I don't know, but that's how I felt at the time. I did get promoted while I was on maternity leave. So, go figure. When I look back at my career, I've had so many male colleagues who have been champions for me, who have been my best supporters. And I still, given I'm in the minority, there aren't too many women around in the tech industry, especially as one grows in their career. Today, I have to tell you, most of my mentors happen to be men, and I haven't felt discriminated very much. So there is this perception of the tech industry being so male dominated that it is impossible for women to survive in. And some of that is true, because when you look around and you don't see very many people that look like you, that you can relate with, it adds a certain amount of pressure, right? And some of it is in our own minds, but some of it is real. It's hard to go and tell a male colleague that you're going through something that is very maternal, or that is very unique to how you feel as a woman. But that said, I strongly believe this is an industry where meritocracy thrives. If you're good at what you do, you can get ahead, and it's a great place to be. But to this day, most of my champions, most of the people that have supported me have been men. But knowing that I'm in the minority, I want to do everything I can to the women that are going through the same struggles that I have, women that are considering whether they want to come back to work after having a child, whether they want to continue going through this as they're raising their kids. I want to be that person that can support them and encourage them to stick it out, because it gets better.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, as you've referred to, I think we'd all acknowledge that the industry has moved, a long way. There has been quite a lot of progress, but do you see the need for more? And if so, what kind of things do you think might be helpful, to women and other sort of diversity groups, if you like, just to move on in the industry?
So there is a lot more we can do. I will be the last one to say things are perfect, right? Because there's so much we can do. One of the things I've noticed is, because there is more men in the industry, and men tend to have, they're more willing to put themselves out there and say, I want to do this. I think I can do this. In fact, I went to a LinkedIn Women in Data event where they shared statistics about how many people apply for jobs on LinkedIn and how qualified they are for the jobs that they're applying to, right? And they said, if there are 10 skills that a job is that the requirement has listed, men apply to the job if they have 5 or 6 out of those skills. And women do not apply to those jobs unless they have all of those skills, or at least 9 out of the 10 skills. So I think recognizing that women react differently and being cognizant to that is something very important in the industry. Manager training and helping our leaders recognize enough that the subtle differences exist amongst the people in their teams, whether it is a woman or a minority engineer or somebody else, recognizing that and seek out the opinions and the voices that are not loud enough, the hands that don't come up every time, make it a point to engage them, bring them in, is a big factor in how a minority person feels in the group. And a lot of times, because there is more men in the conversation, or more people of a certain kind at the table, the minority folks can feel subdued, but it takes somebody to draw them into the conversation. And that takes a little bit of insight and training for the managers. And that is an area where I feel the tech industry can do more to help women and other minority groups grow and cherish and feel like they belong. The other thing that I feel is so unfair is somehow any TV, any movie you watch where engineers are portrayed, it is almost made out to be a geeky math whiz that can survive and thrive in this industry. I completely disagree with that notion. Yes, certain level of STEM knowledge, mathematical, analytical ability, more so than mathematical, is required. But this is a very creative industry, right? We get to create things that were science fiction 50 years ago. Virtual reality was truly science fiction. Cell phones were, didn't exist 50 years ago. But today, if you think about how we live in the society, everything has changed, and a lot of it is because of the tech industry. This is truly a creative space where women who are inherently recognized to be more creative can come in and play a big part. So looking at how the tech industry needs to do more, I think we need to recognize that more needs to be done to encourage people from different backgrounds and bring in diversity and give them a voice and encourage them to be themselves, as well as address this perception that exists that this is so male dominated and so geeky and nerdy that common people will not fit in is going to go a long way in encouraging more women to come in.
Yeah, and that's potentially difficult to achieve that. Any thoughts? I mean, as you say, the STEM subjects traditionally are school and then university are what's pushed. You're saying obviously that's, well, some of that might be important. It's the creativity, but just what do you think? Does the IT industry need to get, as an industry, maybe because individual companies might do stuff, but do we need a sort of, in the same way that the army and the RAF advertise on telly and say, come and join, and they make it sound like you're joining a team? Does the IT industry need to sort of come up with that kind of storyline, all these exciting things, as you say, VR and all that they can do, and attract people like that, or what other things can be done, do you think?
Actually, this takes me back to one of my kids who is a computer science student at this time. When I look at his class, there's very few girls going into CS schools at this point. And same for high school, very few women taking computer science classes during high school, relatively. I'm not saying they're not. And I live in the heart of Silicon Valley, and I don't see enough young girls going into computer science, enough, right? So encouraging that early on and helping them see that there is more to computer science than hanging out with a bunch of nerdy guys is going to go a long way. I'm a big believer in, having talks at high school levels where, somebody from the industry can go share their experience and help young women see that there is a future that they may not have considered, and it's great for them. Internships, college recruitment events where we bring on more voluntarily and with intent, bring on more young women and diversity recruits into the company, give them an opportunity to experience it, can go a long way. And once they are in the industry, when we have people, keeping them motivated, encouraging the quiet ones, not just women, but the people that are inherently, introverted and not the kind that raise a hand and jump in at everything, and keeping them engaged and helping them grow, giving them mentorship is going to go a long way. I think we've made progress in making it possible for people to have a good familial balance, having to go and take some time off for kids or leave early to go pick up kids. But when it comes to how much effort goes into bringing on people from diverse backgrounds, I don't think we've done enough. Recruiting is a big way to solve this. And once people come in, I think meritocracy can help. But going back to your point, I think the industry needs to be more cognizant of people from diverse backgrounds and encouraging them to grow and thrive in this ecosystem that we've built.
And maybe just as we finish, are you sort of optimistic that the progress that's been made and the more needs to be, do you think in, I don't know, 5-10 years time, we will achieve a sort of situation where there is no longer need for conversations around diversity and women in IT, because everything will be perfectly sort of balanced and everyone will be treated, you know, on their own merits as opposed to anything, you know, any characteristics they may or may not possess? Or do you just slightly worry that it may either take rather longer or there will always be certain barriers? Or is it just generational, so that, you know, in 20 years time, when all the youngsters who seem to be much more open to, you know, the idea of diversity and not, you know, being very non-judgmental, etc., we just have to wait for those to hit the workplace, etc.? Just thoughts as to the future.
I'm optimistic, but I'm also a little bit cautious. I'm optimistic because I see a lot more recognition at various levels, all the way from board to leadership to recruitment. There is recognition of the fact that we need to do more. And companies have invested over the past 2 or 3 years. I'm seeing a lot more investment in what are we going to do. More conversations are happening. So there is active engagement on how do we encourage a more even distribution amongst our employee base. So I'm optimistic about that. But when I look back at 20-some years that I have spent in the industry, not a lot has changed. And that gives me pause about, if we keep up the current interest and investment that seems to be happening in encouraging diversity, I do want to believe that things will be better, because this is different from the past 15, 20 years that I've seen, and I'm hopeful. But if we don't keep up the energy and the interest, I worry that it will fall back and we'll continue to have the same conversations. So I want to say cautiously optimistic. And each one of us that is here in this industry needs to do a little bit to help move in the right direction.
Okay, no, that's lovely. It's been brilliant to chat to you, Asha, and thank you for sharing your thoughts. So yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Bye.